Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh to the Father but by me. He will never change. But you must change.
The alleged cover-up by leaders of the Southern Baptist Convention. The report lists hundreds of ministers accused of sexual abuse.
We are believing for 200,000 people to give contributions of $300 or more.
Around on social media or in the news to find some sort of like division or anger. And this started, in my opinion, around 2012, 2013 or so with a subtle thing. The blue dress, gold dress conversation. We're going to throw that up there. Now, listen, I don't know what you see on either side, but I have been a blue dress guy my entire life. One time, I remember seeing the gold dress, and I was like, whoa, whoa. And when I looked back, it was blue again. And I was like, no, like I really wanted to see this thing. But people were going at it online like, no, it's blue, no, it's gold. And they were really actually getting angry in the Facebook comment section back in this like 10 years ago or whenever it was. And it's like, guys, it's an optical illusion. Getting mad at each other about a literal optical illusion is the most preposterous thing I can think of. But we always like to argue, right? We like to have that tension. There's been so many examples in pop culture through the years, recently and historically, big and small. Well, a couple of those might be, one of the biggest ones I can think of is, are you a Star Trek guy or a Star Wars girl? Star Trek or Star Wars, which one's better? I don't know, I never watched Star Trek. I watched Star Wars, so I'm going to land on that side. But some people, you tell a Star Trek person that Star Wars is better, and they get angry. They'll attack you almost. They'll actually like lose their mind because they found so much of their identity in Star Trek. And Star Wars, we were a big fan of it until Marvel ruined it, frankly, and now it's just not quite as good anymore. But people are really passionate about that. What about Team Coke or Team Pepsi? It's really, people get excited. It's the same thing, people. It's the exact same thing. Why are we getting riled up about this? Or the big one, the one that is really dividing Edmonton, where we are actually, like Twitter online is losing our minds. We're ready to just be at each other's throats over. And that is whether or not the Oilers should keep or trade Jesse Puljujarvi. The Bison King himself is one of those things that either unites us or divides us, and there's two polarized sides to this. Do we keep him? We put him on the first line? Is he going to be in the Spengler Cup next year? Is he going to be in the NHL, or is he going to be an all-star? No one knows. But we all know that we don't like the other side and we get upset about it. What about things that are a little bit more meaningful or a little more intense? Wasn't that long ago that we had to wear masks everywhere? Feels like it was a long time ago, but it's really only not even like half a year ago. That's crazy to think about that. People on each side were very upset with each other. Vaccine mandates, that was a huge thing. People were very upset, and to this day there's still some tension about that as well. Elections in recent history, the Trump versus Biden election 2020, one of the most polarizing conversations. People on one side thinking the people on the other side are evil and bad and dangerous and vice versa. Or maybe the most predominant issue, the most divisive issue of the last year or so, and that was the Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard trial, defamation trial, which really got people excited on one side or the other. And really, who knew there was so many creative ways to win an argument in a relationship? I remember back in 2020 when the pandemic first started. And like leading up to that spring, there was still a lot of tension that was happening in the world, right? Like we had cancel culture, all these things were rising up, people were getting upset, college campuses were losing their minds over different ideologies. But like, I thought there was going to be some hope within the chaos of the pandemic because there was so much unity. Remember, you'd be driving down the road if you had to, that's all you could do was go for a walk or go for a drive. You know, you had to be locked in. We were all locked in for what we thought was going to be 2 weeks. It turned into a lot longer than that. We'd go for a drive and every billboard would say, we are all in this together. I actually remember a real sense of like community, and that we were going to rally around this. We were going to do whatever it took, and we were going to support each other. And even if we had different opinions, even our differences couldn't hold us back from coming together as a community and being united for the first time in a long time. And that lasted for all of maybe 2 weeks, because after that, we were ready to kill each other. We were finding every reason to fight each other. We were mad. There's no in between. You were either a communist government simp, or you were some crazy, like, grandma-hating monster super spreader. People on either side. There's no nuance. People just wanted to attack the other side. We labeled and we attacked. And we thought maybe that would be the worst of it. But it feels like in all areas of life, not just in pandemic policy or all those different things that came with that, there is this snowballing issue where it seems like in every place where we can find division, we will find it, and we will continue to wedge that divide further and further apart, because we want to have this crisis. We want to have this fight. And it's been growing ever since that started. Look back, George Floyd, those protests that were happening, left versus right-wing politics, hugely divisive. Vaccine mandates, like we talked about, protests, wars, conspiracy theories, convoys, things that bring up emotion for different reasons for different people, probably even in this room. I won't do it because it's the worst thing you could ever imagine for a situation like this, but if you said one of these issues, you said everyone on one side of the church sit there, and the other side of the issue on that side, it would be probably not very far off from 50-50 in a lot of ways. There's a lot of different opinions within any select group of people. A room this size is going to have very, very differing ideologies and ways that they navigate their politics, their worldview, all those different things. Even in a space that comes under the banner of Jesus Christ in the Bible. There are those gray areas, those things that aren't mandated directly, where we can have huge divisive misunderstandings or different opinions in how that goes. And we're going to have those different opinions in a church, a workplace, a family, a friend group. Listen, if you've liked being angry, if you enjoy anger, if you enjoy just spending all your days on your mom's basement on Twitter just raging out at people, yelling at people, the last couple of years, it was your Super Bowl, baby. This was your Mardi Gras. This was your moment. I hope you never have another one, because it's been ugly, and it's been bad for us as a society, and not just as a society, for us as a church, for us in general. And as much as I hate everything I just described, as much as I'm like, man, like all these things are bad, I recognize that I've also been a part of the problem. Through the last few years, through my whole life, through recent history, it's a human thing, and I'm no different than you in that sense, where I get upset about things. But I've been a part of that problem, because no matter what side of the issue that we land on, of the ones that we just talked about, I'd guess that at one point or another, myself included, that we've all taken a look at our family members, our friends, people around us, maybe people in church, and been like, man, they are not good people. They're stupid, they're idiotic, they're dangerous. How can they think that way? How did they ever land on this crazy worldview? They're not valuable, they're irredeemable, they're simply others, or those people. They're a problem. And we don't just recognize that maybe there's a problem or there's something there that needs to be discussed further, but we identify them as their personality as a problem, not as a family member, not as a friend, but a problem. And we slowly remove their humanity from them. We slowly stop caring about them, and we define them by this one simple position. Looking at your life, let me ask you this. Back then, the last 2 years, historically and especially currently, how is your heart? How is your heart towards other people? Not just the people that you absolutely agree with everything on, but like just people in general. Do you see the best in people, or has cynicism started to creep in? Do you see other people, even who differ from you in their opinion, as well-intentioned and just having different worldviews, or do you see them as the enemy? Do you fight through the negativity to choose love, or do you find it easier to just hate the people that you see as foolish, dangerous, or just plain stupid? Now, I'm not here to defend any ideology. I'm not up here to tell you any political conversations, who you should vote for, what you should believe in any of those ways. My job is one thing: to help you navigate a Jesus-based life and help you to understand that the best decision you can make in your life is to follow Jesus and make the decision to make him king of your life. That's my job as a pastor. He's the perfect example of how to live life, how to navigate the nuances of humanity, of human conversation, and the difficulty that comes with that. Because it is sometimes like trying to get out of a corn maze in the dark, right? It's hard. It's not always easy. But I think before we can solve the problems in the world around us, because we basically can all acknowledge that there are dangerous thoughts out there, there's dangerous ideologies, there's things that we don't agree on that scare us, that make us concerned. We can always still recognize that there are things that are not good in the world or that we think could be a problem. But before we can cure a sickness in the world around us, we have to look into our own hearts and fix the sickness in our hearts first. It's easy to look out in the world and be like, man, look at everything that's wrong on TV and around the globe, and look at all these global issues, look at all these things that are happening. But it's hard to look in the mirror and say, actually, sometimes I suck too. Sometimes I need to actually make some changes to my heart, to my actions, to the way that I view the world around me. I know for me that's hard, because no one ever thinks that they're the problem until someone either shows it to them or the mistake that they're making kind of presents itself in a negative reality. And I think for us as church, sometimes we get caught up in trying to shape culture. We think, it's our job to go in there and advocate politically and get in all those spaces, write my MP, and do all these different things. And I'm not saying let's not engage politically. You should vote. It's a privilege. I'm happy with that. But our job is not to shape culture and to twist it. But our job is to bring Jesus' love to culture, to present that to the world around us. Not to fix it, but to bring love to it and to bring in that Jesus-based reality to the world around us. And that's hard because we want to win everything. By nature, humans, we want to win. We have there's a conflict, we want to solve it. We all want that. I get it. I don't like having problems around us. But that's not necessarily our job. Our job is not to just win the political battle, but it is to show that Jesus is the most attractive way to live your life, to give a great example of that through everything that we do, so that the world around us can see that and be like, that's worth seeking. And if enough people see that and see Jesus as the example, then maybe the culture can change around that. But we get kind of the cart ahead of the horse in this conversation because we're so focused on winning a cultural or political battle that we don't look in our own hearts. We don't look at what our actual purpose is as people who follow Jesus, and that is to present Jesus in a way that makes him and the way of following him attractive to others and shows the truth and the reality that following Jesus and making the decision to follow him is the best decision you can make in your entire life, and doing that in an authentic way. So why is it that we often see division, anger, fighting, all of these things, not just around the world or on TV, but in the church? And I'm not just talking about the project, not just the people in this room. I'm sure we all have our issues as well. But I'm talking globally. We've probably all seen this, especially recently, churches going at it, just being mad at each other, Christians airing their dirty laundry. And I can say that any issue that I presented, maybe sans Johnny Depp, Amber Heard, that we've all probably seen in our own examples or online, or just some Christians or people in church who are fighting about them fairly publicly. And we're fighting each other. We're going at it, whether it's online or in person, in the news or in the pews, and everyone's really, really upset. And the worst part is the world around us is watching with a big old bag of popcorn, just saying, look at these crazy Christians. They're nuts. They're going at it. Look, they just shared every possible crazy thing on the internet possible, and they're entertained past the Chicago mix because we're going to go for round 2. And this is a problem, because when we choose that, we choose to deny what Jesus has called us to do as a church. There's a verse in John 13, we're going to throw it up there. It says in John 13, 34 to 35, and this is a first-person account of one of Jesus' disciples named John. He says, "So now I am giving you a new commandment. Love each other just as I have loved you. You should love each other. Your love for one another will prove to the world that you are my disciples." This is Jesus' words. The reality is that really should concern us on some level, because this is scary. Because the way that we love each other in the church is how the people outside of the church are going to know that we're disciples of Jesus. Our actions. He doesn't say, your love for one another, when you agree on everything, that's how they'll know. Your love for one another when everything's going great, that's how they'll know. When you love each other, when everything's perfect, no conflict, on the best day ever, the sun's out, everything's great, that's how you'll know. No. He says, you love for one another will prove to the world that you're my disciples. His disciples who he was speaking to were such a diverse group of people. There was a tax collector. There was people who were oppressed by the Romans, who the tax collector worked for, and were very, very, very focused and religious Jews at the time, and would have had this huge tension. And he's saying that to those ones, and saying you need to love each other, and the way that you show your love to each other is how they'll know that you're my disciples. That is the example. That is how you show my love to people, is through the love you have with each other. Your example starts in your church community with how you treat each other, and then that will be an example and spread to the rest of the world. I think sometimes when we're in church, we think, my friend, I don't swear, I just say fudge, and the friend's going to be like, well, I want what that guy has in his life. I'm not saying go out and cuss out your friend, but I'm saying that's probably not enough. If you don't swear, but you go out there and you're a jerk to everybody, and you have this awful feeling towards people, and you just see them as less than human, that's not going to cut it. Because we have to choose to love. And choosing to love is a great way to put it, because it is a choice. Because it's not always easy to do that. If we treat each other with less love than the outside world, why would anyone, anywhere from outside the church community, want anything to do with it? Imagine meeting someone new and being like, hey, you want to come kind of hang out with me and my friends? But we stab each other in the back. We send text messages about each other all the time to each other. We just kind of troll each other's social media to make fun of each other. And we're going to judge you pretty hard. We're just not going to love you very much. But you can come hang out. We can go to Earl's. Be great. We got great clam chowder, but we're not great to you. So how is that going to go? Right? Nobody wants to be a part of that. Why would you want something that is exactly the same, if not worse, than the option that is everywhere? There needs to be something about us that is different, that actually shows the world hey, there is a way to navigate the gray areas of life and our disagreements and even the things that we absolutely disagree with. But in those areas that are not mandated biblically, or even if they are, how do you navigate that conversation with somebody? How do you navigate disagreement even if you think that somebody is doing something wrong? Is it judgmental? Is it aggressive? Is it rude? Or is it done out of love? Think about your own life. How have you done at navigating this? Is there work to be done? I know there is for me. And who hasn't done that? Who hasn't texted a friend about another friend's social media post? Who hasn't rage scrolled through Twitter just looking recreationally to get mad because there's going to be a fight breaking out somewhere in there, right? Just spent time dwelling, thinking about how negative their person in their life is. We've been going through this series on 1 Corinthians called Bad Church. The church in 1 Corinthians living in this Greco-Roman culture, and they were a pretty immoral church. The 1st and 2nd Corinthians letters in the Bible were by a pastor named Paul, who's trying to kind of help them out and say, hey guys, I love you, but it's time to grow up a little bit. So we're going to catch up with Paul's letter in 1 Corinthians 12. It says, just as a body, though one, has many parts, but all its many parts form one body, so it is with Christ. For we were all baptized by one Spirit so as to form one body, whether Jews or Gentiles, slave or free, and we were all given the one Spirit to drink. Even so the body is not made up of one part, but of many. Now if the foot should say, because I'm not a hand, I do not belong to the body, it would not for that reason stop being part of the body. And if the ear should say, because I'm not an eye, I do not belong to the body, it would not for that reason stop being a part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would the sense of hearing be? If the whole body were an ear, where would the sense of smell be? But in fact, God has placed the parts in the body, every one of them, just as He wanted them to be. If they were all one part, where would the body be? As there are many parts, but one body. And like at first glance, this could kind of be seen as kind of a ridiculous statement, right? Like, of course, you can't take the foot off and say, well, it's not a part of the body. Like, but think about this. You have to look at the context of what was being written. There was stuff happening in that church at that time, a lot of classism and a lot of division amongst the different groups. This whole idea of this church taking all these different cultures, slaves and free people, Jews and Gentiles, so Jewish people who chose to follow Jesus, and then anyone else who wasn't Jewish being a Gentile. There was different socioeconomic classes that were coming together, and for the first time in that culture, they were all equal under one umbrella of Christianity and church. And as you can imagine, kind of starting this from scratch, there was some mistakes made along the way, because lots of people for their whole life had looked at other groups of people and said, I'm better than them. I'm smarter than them, I'm more educated than them, I have more money than them. There's an example, communion, which is, if you haven't been around church, is something we do to celebrate and to remember the death and rising again of Jesus 3 days after he was crucified on the cross. And it's just a symbolic act where we have some juice to represent the blood that he shed and some bread to represent the body that was, beaten and damaged. And that's something that we do. They would do that a little bit differently back then. They would do it with this big feast. There's a big celebration, a full meal. But what was happening was the rich people were getting there early, eating all the food, and not giving any to the poorer people. It's not a very nice church. It's a bad church, as it was. Not good. It's something that you don't want to be a part of. That doesn't sound like something that you want to be a part of at all. Why would you want to be a part of a church that treats poor people bad? Why would you want to be a part of a church that sees this group of people as not equal? And that doesn't mean that there weren't some sort of disparity. Some people definitely were more educated. Some people were going to have a little bit more money, more means. Some people are better looking than others. We all have different things that make us who we are. But the thing that is supposed to bind us together is that we all are on the same page, that Jesus is God, and that we need to make him famous, and we need to follow his example as it shows in the Bible. All these class issues shouldn't have mattered, but there was all these things that were happening. They saw each other as less than. These political issues, these philosophical issues, they were what were becoming primary. They took the secondary things in life and they made them primary. They defined each other by them, and it became a problem everywhere. Does that sound familiar to you at all? And when we look at this example, this metaphor that Pastor Paul is sharing, that we have all these different parts of the body that are different and have different roles, and they may seem different, like a hand and feet do different work. And I don't know if one is really more glorious than the other, but you can't differentiate and say that because they're different that they're not a part of the same body. A body comes together, all the parts of our body, to do work, to do tasks. Think of a hockey player. If a hockey player has great, fast legs and can skate super quick, amazing, but they have no hands. They can't even move their hands in any way. You put a hockey stick in their hand and their hands just stop working. You ain't going to play hockey. Well, you might be able to play for the Flames, but that's not beside the point. Hope no one's from Calgary here. Pastor Paul is writing here that the community of the church is like this human body, and you can't cut one part off and be healthy. You can't value one part less. If you're the part that feels less, you can't see yourself that way, because you are equally important to what's happening here. You are equally as important to the church. You are valuable. There is no difference. It's silly to think that a foot or a hand is not equally part of a body, and it's equally as silly for somebody here in any part of the church to believe that you are less valuable because of where you come from, your socioeconomic background, how smart you are, your education level, whatever it is, how you look, who you are. You are still a valuable part of the church. And that doesn't mean that we're all going to have equality across the board in every outcome of life. Some people will have more money than others. Some people have different jobs than others. But whether you're a pediatrician or you're a plumber, you are equally valued here. At the project, that's something that maybe churches haven't always navigated perfectly, but it is my promise to you as your pastor that we aim in every way, that it is our goal to make this the best example of what the church is intended to be. To have you be a part of it, and we can't do it without you. I love football, because football, you have 11 players on each team. And it doesn't matter how good the quarterback is. It doesn't matter how good your best defensive player is. Especially on defense, if you have one player who misses their assignment, it's going to be a touchdown. You could have the best middle linebacker in the entire world to ever play, but if you have somebody covering a wide receiver and he falls down all the time, you're going to have a touchdown. There's not much you can do about it. You're only as good as the smallest part of your team or the weakest part of your team. We need everybody coming together. Everyone makes this team. Everyone makes the church, and that's what defines us. And we need to choose that unity, and we need to find ways to live that out in everything we do. That is the example that Jesus gives us. So we're called to be a community that follows the Bible. We're called to be a community that acknowledges sin, no matter how awkward or uncomfortable that may be or unpopular that may be. And we carry each other through our lowest moments and our highest highs. And there is examples where we need to hold each other accountable, and some people have tension with that because that is not fun to have somebody who you know and love come to you and say, hey, listen, I know what you're doing. I know that you're trying to be on the right page, but listen, like this is actually not in alignment with what Jesus has called us to do. And accountability does matter. That's what makes us better. We're better together. We're better when we have each other to call each other out and to help us to be the better version of what we are. Now, you need to recognize this, is that you need to know your relationship to somebody. If you see somebody and you think that they're living in some terrible way and you have no friendship with them or they're not living in some form of sin, and you just go up there and say, hey, you're not doing good. You're sinning. Not good. Stop it. What right do you have to say that? You have to have a relationship with people. And the reality is this, go back to that verse in John, is that they will know you by how you love each other. They'll know you're my disciples by how you love each other. If even correction, even accountability, holding each other to a certain standard and making each other better, if that's not done out of a perspective and a heart and a lens of loving each other, you're just going to miss the mark completely. It's not going to be good. And maybe you have experienced that in church before. Maybe you have seen the worst example of what church can look like. Organized religion to you is a swear word. And you can't believe you're either here in person or you're watching online, and you're like, man, I just cannot believe I'm here. Somebody hurt you. Somebody said something. Somebody damaged your perspective of Jesus, the church, and you just want nothing to do with it again. Because of what happened, I want to say I'm sorry that happened. I've experienced it in my life before. And it's really easy to just throw it all out. To throw out and say, it's all bad. I can't trust any pastor. I can't trust any Christian. I can't trust any church because of what happened here, what was said here, what this did to my life, what this did to me. But the reality is that the church is made up of human beings, and we're all going to be flawed. We're flawed people. But even the most flawed example, even the most broken and wrong example of what a church can look like or what a Christian can look like, that doesn't represent Jesus, and that doesn't take away from the potential of what the church can be for you and your life and can do for the world around us if we would put our mind to it and do the work it takes to choose unity, to choose love, and to choose to love our neighbor as ourselves, and do the work that Jesus has called us to in the world, to make our city a better place, to make our schools a better place, to make our entire world, our province, our country a better place because we choose love, we choose unity, and we don't choose hate. Mistakes will happen, but we have to choose to work through that, to see the light that is through the fog of people's mistakes. I'm sorry that happened to you, but I promise you there's something better, there's something more on the other side of choosing to push through and be a part of the change to make it better. Choosing unity is hard. It's really hard to choose to look at the big things and not just the small things and the preferences in our lives. And the danger we have as Christians is we often let our pride get in the way. Pride is the biggest thing, and our hurt, because we focus on those secondary things. We want to be right. Everybody wants to be right. Nobody wants to be wrong. I hate being wrong. Even if I know I'm wrong, sometimes I'll still argue on the side that I know is wrong because I don't want anyone to know. I think we've all been there before. We have these preferences about everything, even within church, how we worship, how we baptize people, how people preach, how long a service is, vaccine mandates, masks, how people dress, political alignments, all these different ideological differences. There's all these different things that become a problem. And we think everyone is stupid who doesn't think like us. But here is a hot take for you. You don't get to hate people because they're stupid. Because there isn't like a calculus exam to get into heaven. You're going to have to get used to people who maybe are wrong or people who are different than you. And we have to make the decision to choose what is good and choose what is love and navigate those conversations in the right way. Just because you don't agree doesn't mean you don't get to love people. And I can't stress this enough, it is hard. It's a choice, it's a grit, it's something you have to work through, you have to push through, because the baseline of humanity is that we hate. The baseline of humanity, once we've decided we don't like somebody, we won't do anything that they say. There's nothing redeeming about them. I have one family member, he really doesn't like Justin Trudeau. But Justin Trudeau could say, oxygen is good for you. And he would just, and pass out. Because he just really doesn't like him. And we just decide that these people are irredeemable. Because we see them as the enemy. So let me ask you this, who is your enemy? Who is the person, the group, the ideology, the family member that you see as your enemy and you've seen them that way for a long time? I want you to remember one thing. As much as they may bother you, as much as they may have hurt you before, Jesus, while he was being murdered on the cross, prayed for the people that were killing him. He said, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. They're wrong. They were totally wrong. They were torturing and murdering him, and he prayed for them. And that kind of shows me something. In the moments when I'm just ticked off, in the moments where I think people are dangerous and wrong and scary, and I just want to rant and rave and throw them out and everything about them, I don't get to be different than Jesus. Jesus prayed for those people. So I'd say this, instead of making Jesus the mascot of your politics or your ideology, the shield so you don't have to actually critically think or be challenged in any way, instead of just choosing hate, instead of just choosing to throw people out and to discredit them and to see them as completely not valuable, instead of choosing hate, which is easy, choose unity, which is hard, but worth it. And so I want to give you one challenge. If you can walk away from this space, from the project this week, with one thing to do, one thing to make you more like Jesus, one thing you can do for the next 7 days and hopefully beyond that will change the way that you see the world and make you more like Jesus, which is the point of following a Jesus-based life, and it's this. Your challenge is to spend more time praying for people than you do complaining about them. A chance to complain about people is an opportunity to pray for them. And I promise you, when you're praying for somebody, it's impossible to hate them. Because you see their humanity, you recognize that they're just people. Just like you, they were a baby. Even the most messed up person was a baby at one point, a kid. Something bad happened, or something changed the way they think. Something shaped their worldview, but they were no different than you. They were just a baby. They're not your enemy. People in the church are not your enemy. An opportunity to pray for people comes from every chance to complain. So the next time this week when you see something, whether it's from a world leader, whether it's from somebody in your life, your friend group, a professor at your school, something like that, or somebody just does anything to take you off, there is your opportunity to pray for people, to choose unity over hate. Hate is easy. Unity is hard. So as the band comes up to pray, just take some time, you can sing along, but I want you to think through, who are those people in your life that you need to change your perspective on? The people in your friend group, the people in your church, the people in your family, the people in the world, the people on Twitter, whatever it is, who you need to take a moment to not complain about in your head anymore. And now listen, you can pray and complain at the same time. Like, dear God, please be with Dave, because he's an idiot, and I don't like him. And God, you know how stupid he is, and you know how much he makes me mad. You know how bad his ideas are. No, pray that God blesses them. Pray that God is with them. Pray that God would show them the right way and show you the right way as well. So take some time and just be honest with yourself, be honest with God, and I believe His Holy Spirit's going to speak to you, and you'll see people differently. The first steps towards choosing unity over hate is praying for people instead of complaining for them. So if you can, Let's stand. We're going to worship a little with a few more songs.